Welcome to HFY Stories. If you're ready for jaw-dropping stories and a universe full of excitement, hit that subscribe button like it's the big red button in a space opera. Give us a like if you're feeling that interstellar vibe and comment below to join the conversation. The Unlikely Alliance. The year was 2145, and Earth had finally achieved a fragile peace after decades of conflict. The nations had united under a single banner, forming the Earth Coalition. However, humanity's first encounter with intelligent life beyond the stars was not a peaceful one. The Zikari, an advanced alien species with a reputation for being conquerors, had set their sights on Earth. But as the war loomed on the horizon, something unexpected happened. The Zikari were a formidable force, their technology far superior to anything Earth could muster. However, as their warships approached Earth, a mysterious third party intervened. The Xilorians, a previously unknown alien race, emerged from the depths of space. They were powerful, but unlike the Zikari, they did not come to conquer. Instead, they offered an alliance. The Xilorians were a curious species, with an affinity for exploration and a deep respect for life. Their technology, though powerful, was focused on preservation rather than destruction. When they intercepted the Zikari fleet, a standoff ensued. But rather than engaging in battle, the Xilorians opened communications with both the Zikari and Earth. Humanity was caught off guard. The Earth Coalition had been preparing for war, not diplomacy. Yet the Xilorians offered a solution that no one had expected. They proposed a truce. The Zikari would withdraw their forces, and in return, the Xilorians would share their technology with Earth, helping humanity develop defenses strong enough to deter any future threats. The Zikari, though reluctant, agreed to the terms. They recognized the Xilorians' power and understood that a direct confrontation would be costly. And so, an uneasy peace was established. The Xilorians became Earth's allies, and the two species began to work together. But not everyone was pleased with the alliance. There were whispers within the Earth Coalition, rumors of factions that did not trust the Xilorians. Some believed that the aliens had ulterior motives, that they were merely biding their time before revealing their true intentions. These doubts, though unspoken, lingered in the minds of many. Among those who were suspicious was General Marcus Steele, a veteran of Earth's military and one of the most respected leaders within the coalition. He had fought in countless battles and had seen the worst of humanity. To him, the idea of trusting an alien race so easily was naive. Yet, as a soldier, he followed orders. And his orders were to work with the Xilorians. Despite his reservations, General Steele found himself growing close to one of the Xilorian ambassadors, a female named Zaira. Zaira was unlike anyone Steele had ever met. She was intelligent, calm, and had an almost otherworldly grace about her. The two spent hours discussing everything from military tactics to philosophy, and Steele found himself intrigued by her. There was something about Zaira that made him question his beliefs. Zaira, for her part, was fascinated by Steele. She had studied humanity from afar, but meeting a human in person was a different experience. She admired Steele's strength and determination, but she also saw the pain in his eyes, the scars that years of war had left on his soul. As they spent more time together, Zaira began to develop feelings for Steele, feelings that she knew were dangerous. Despite their growing bond, Steele and Zaira knew that their relationship was forbidden. The Earth Coalition had strict rules about fraternizing with alien species, and Steele was a high-ranking officer. But as tensions between the Coalition and the Xilorians began to rise, they found themselves drawn to each other in ways neither could explain. Meanwhile, the whispers of dissent within the Coalition grew louder. There were those who believed that the Xilorians were manipulating humanity, that they were using their technology to control the Earth's leaders. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire, and soon there were calls for action. Some factions within the military began to push for a preemptive strike against the Xilorians, to eliminate the threat before it could fully manifest. General Steele was caught in the middle. On one hand, he understood the concerns of his fellow soldiers. The Tellurians were an unknown quantity, and there was always the possibility that they had ulterior motives. But on the other hand, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that Zera was genuine, that the Tellurians truly wanted peace. As the days passed, the situation grew more tense. The Earth Coalition was on the brink of splitting, with some factions ready to declare war on the Tellurians. Steele knew that if he didn't act soon, the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve would be shattered. But what could he do? He was just one man, caught between his duty to his planet and his feelings for a woman who wasn't even human. Steele knew that whatever decision he made would have far-reaching consequences, not just for him, but for the entire human race. And so General Marcus Steele made a choice. He would confront Zera, demand the truth about the Tellurians' intentions, and decide once and for all where his loyalties lay. But as he prepared to meet her, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that forces beyond his control were already in motion. The stakes were higher than ever, and the future of humanity hung in the balance. The shadow of doubt. General Steele stood in the observation deck of the Tellurian embassy, gazing out at the stars. The room was quiet, save for the hum of alien machinery that he had yet to fully understand. Zera stood beside him, her serene presence a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in Steele's mind. "You're troubled," Zera said, her voice soft but carrying a weight of understanding. She could sense the conflict within Steele, even if he tried to hide it. Steele sighed, his breath fogging the transparent material of the observation window. "There's a lot at stake, Zera. More than you can imagine. People are scared. They don't know what to believe anymore." Zera turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. "And what do you believe, Marcus? Do you trust me?" Steele hesitated, his mind racing with the doubts and fears that had plagued him for weeks. "I want to trust you, Zera, but it's not that simple. There are too many unanswered questions, too many risks." Zera's gaze softened, and she reached out to touch Steele's hand. The contact was brief, but it sent a shiver down his spine. "I understand your hesitation," she said. "But you must know that the Tellurians mean no harm. We are here to help, not to conquer. Our technology is meant to protect, not destroy." "But what if that's not enough?" Steele replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "What if your presence here puts Earth in even greater danger? The Zukari might return, and next time, they won't hold back. And what about the factions within the coalition? There are those who would rather strike first than wait to be betrayed." Zera's expression grew somber. "We are aware of the dissent within your ranks. It saddens us to see such division among your people. But Marcus, we are not your enemy. The real threat lies elsewhere." Steele frowned, his suspicion flaring up once more. "What do you mean? Is there something you're not telling us?" Before Zera could respond, the room's lights flickered, and a series of alarms blared through the embassy. Steele's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, though he knew it would be of little use against the advanced technology surrounding him. Zera's expression shifted from calm to alarmed. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice laced with urgency. "We need to get to the control room." Steele followed her through the winding corridors of the embassy, his heart pounding in his chest. The Tellurian architecture was a strange blend of organic curves and metallic surfaces, alien yet somehow familiar. As they reached the control room, Steele's breath caught in his throat. The main display showed a fleet of ships, far larger than anything Steele had ever seen. But these were not Silurian ships. Their design was sleek, predatory, and unmistakably Zikari. "They've returned," Zera whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "The Zikari have returned." Steele's mind raced as he took in the situation. The Zikari were not supposed to return. The truce had been clear. The Zikari would leave Earth alone in exchange for the Tellurians' intervention. But now, It seemed that the Zikari had broken their word. "We need to alert the coalition," Steele said, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "They need to know what's happening." Zara nodded, but her expression was grim. "It's worse than that, Marcus. The Zikari aren't just here for Earth. They're here for the Tellurians. They see us as a threat, and they won't stop until we're eradicated." Steele felt a chill run down his spine. This was more than just a battle for Earth. This was a war for survival, and humanity was caught in the middle. As Zara began to transmit a warning to the Earth Coalition, Steele's thoughts turned to the factions within the military. If they found out about the Zikari's return, they might see it as proof that the Tellurians had led them into a trap. It could be the spark that ignited a full-scale war, not just with the Zikari, but with the Tellurians as well. "Zara," Steele said, his voice low, "we need to keep this contained. If the wrong people find out about this, it could lead to disaster." Zara glanced at him, her expression conflicted. "I understand, Marcus. But the truth will come out eventually. We can't hide this forever." Steele nodded, knowing she was right. But there had to be a way to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. As he watched the Zikari fleet draw closer, Steele made a decision. He would do whatever it took to protect Earth, even if it meant going against his own people. But as he and Zara worked together to prepare for the impending attack, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The seeds of doubt had been sown, and it was only a matter of time before they bore fruit. The future of humanity, and the fate of their alliance with the Tellurians, hung by a thread. The battle for trust. The tension in the Tellurian embassy was palpable. Every screen flickered with warnings, each one more urgent than the last. General Marcus Steele stood at the center of the control room, surrounded by alien technology that he could barely comprehend, yet his focus was razor-sharp. The Zikari fleet was closing in, and the fragile alliance between humans and Tellurians was about to be tested like never before. "How long until they reach Earth?" Steele asked, his voice cutting through the noise. Zara, who had taken charge of the situation with a calm that belied the gravity of the threat, glanced at the tactical display. "Less than an hour. They're faster than we anticipated." Steele clenched his fists. They were running out of time, and the Earth Coalition was still in the dark. The message Zara had sent was brief, and the response from Earth had been terse and suspicious. It was clear that the Coalition's leaders were wary of any information coming from the Tellurians, and Steele knew that convincing them of the truth would be an uphill battle. "We need to buy ourselves some time," Steele said, turning to Zara. "Is there any way we can delay them? Force them to rethink their attack?" Zara shook her head. "The Zikari have made up their minds. They're not here to negotiate. They're here to destroy us, and anyone who stands with us." Steele's mind raced as he weighed his options. He knew that Earth's military was no match for the Zikari. Even with the Tellurian technology that had been shared, they were still vastly outgunned. But he also knew that surrender was not an option. The Zikari were ruthless, and any sign of weakness would only embolden them further. As Steele struggled to come up with a plan, the door to the control room hissed open, and a group of Tellurian soldiers entered, their expressions grim. Their leader, a tall, imposing figure named Kale, approached Steele and Zara. "General Steele," Kale said, his voice deep and resonant, "we've detected an anomaly in the Zikari fleet's formation. It appears they are deploying a special unit, separate from the main force." Steele frowned. "A special unit? What are they up to?" Kale glanced at Zara before continuing. "We believe they may be attempting to sabotage the alliance from within. If they can create enough chaos, they might be able to turn Earth's forces against us before the main battle even begins." Steele felt a surge of anger. The Zikari were playing a dangerous game, one that could cost millions of lives. "Do we know where this unit is headed?" Kale nodded. "Our sensors indicate that they are targeting a military installation in one of Earth's remote regions. It's heavily guarded, but if they succeed in causing enough damage, it could trigger a chain reaction of mistrust and fear. Steel knew exactly what the Zikari were trying to do. They wanted to fracture the alliance, to create a scenario where humans would see the Tellurians as the enemy. And if they succeeded, Earth would be defenseless against the impending invasion. "We can't let that happen," Steel said, his voice firm. "We need to intercept that unit before they reach the installation. If we can stop them, we might be able to prevent this from escalating into a full-scale war." Zara stepped forward, her expression resolute. "I'll go with you, Marcus. We can take one of our ships, get there faster than any human craft could." Steel hesitated for a moment. The idea of Zara putting herself in danger didn't sit well with him, but he knew that her presence would be invaluable. She was not only a skilled diplomat, but also a capable fighter, and her knowledge of the Zikari could be the key to stopping them. "All right," Steel said, nodding. "But we're going to need backup. Kale, I want you to coordinate with Earth's forces. Tell them what's happening, and make sure they're ready for anything." Kale inclined his head. "It will be done, General." As Kale left the room to relay Steel's orders, Zara led Steel to the hangar where a sleek Silurian ship awaited them. It was smaller than the massive warships that made up the Silurian fleet, but it was fast and agile, designed for rapid response missions. As they boarded the ship, Steel couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He was about to embark on a mission that could determine the fate of not just Earth, but the entire alliance between humans and Tellurians. The stakes had never been higher, and the margin for error was razor-thin. The ship's engines hummed to life, and within moments they were speeding through space, the stars blurring into streaks of light around them. Steel sat in the co-pilot's seat, his eyes scanning the readouts on the console as Zara piloted the craft with practiced ease. "How long until we reach the target?" Steel asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. 20 minutes, Zara replied. "We'll arrive just ahead of the Zikari unit, but we'll need to move quickly. Once they realize we're there, they'll throw everything they have at us." Steel nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "Our priority is to stop them from reaching the installation. If we can take out their command unit, the rest of their forces might fall into disarray." Zara glanced at Steel, her expression serious. "And if we can't?" Steel's jaw tightened. "Then we do whatever it takes to hold them off until reinforcements arrive. We can't let them succeed, Zara. Too much is at stake." Zara nodded, and for a moment there was silence between them, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Steel could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. As they neared their destination, the ship's sensors began to pick up the Zikari unit. Steel's eyes narrowed as he studied the enemy craft. They were smaller than the main fleet, but heavily armed, clearly designed for a surgical strike. "They're splitting up," Zara said, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. "They're trying to cover more ground, make it harder for us to stop them." Steel frowned. "We'll need to take them out one by one. Start with the command ship. If we can disable it, the rest should follow." Zara nodded, and the ship surged forward, closing the distance between them and the Zikari command ship. As they approached, the Zikari vessels opened fire, streaks of energy cutting through the void of space. Steel's hands flew over the weapons controls, returning fire with precision. The Tellurian ship was nimble, weaving through the enemy's barrage with a grace that Steel had never experienced in a human craft. But the Zikari were relentless. As they closed in on the command ship, Steel could see the enemy's strategy unfolding. They were trying to draw them into a trap, using their superior numbers to overwhelm them. "Zara, watch out!" Steel shouted as a group of Zikari fighters swooped in from above, their weapons blazing. Zara banked hard, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire. "They're trying to box us in." Steel gritted his teeth. They were running out of options. If they didn't act fast, the Zukari would overwhelm them, and the installation would be destroyed. "Focus on the command ship," Steele ordered. "We take it out, and the rest will scatter." Zara nodded, her eyes locked on the target. With a burst of speed, the Tellurian ship surged forward, closing the gap between them and the Zukari command vessel. Steele fired the ship's main cannon, the beam of energy slicing through the void and striking the Zukari ship dead on. The enemy craft shuddered, its shields flickering as it struggled to withstand the assault. "Keep firing," Steele shouted, his hands moving with practiced precision. The Zukari command ship buckled under the onslaught, its hull cracking as the Tellurian ship's weapons tore through it. Finally, with a blinding flash of light, the enemy vessel exploded, debris scattering across space. As the command ship disintegrated, the remaining Zukari vessels hesitated, their formation faltering. Steele knew this was their chance. "Now, Zara, finish them off." Zara didn't hesitate. She maneuvered the ship with skill, targeting the remaining Zukari fighters one by one. Without their command ship to coordinate their efforts, the enemy vessels were no match for the Tellurian craft. Within minutes, the battle was over. The Zukari unit was destroyed, and the installation was safe. But Steele knew that this was only the beginning. The main Zukari fleet was still on its way, and the real battle was yet to come. As Zara set a course back to Earth, Steele allowed himself a moment of relief. They had won this round, but the war was far from over. The alliance between humans and Tellurians had survived another test, but Steele knew that the true challenge lay ahead. They had bought themselves some time, but the clock was still ticking, and when the Zukari returned, they would bring the full force of their wrath with them.
The storm breaks. The calm that followed the skirmish was short-lived. General Marcus Steele and Zara barely had time to catch their breath as their ship hurtled back toward Earth. The destruction of the Zukari special unit had bought them precious time, but the larger threat still loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. The full Zukari fleet was on its way, and this time, they wouldn't be satisfied with anything less than total annihilation. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, Steele's thoughts were consumed by the upcoming battle. He knew that the odds were stacked against them. Even with the Zellorians' help, Earth's forces were no match for the Zukari armada. The only chance they had was to stand united, to present a front so strong that even the Zukari would hesitate. But unity was a fleeting concept. As the ship landed at the Earth Coalition's main military base, Steele could already see the cracks forming. The atmosphere was tense, and the soldiers and officers who greeted them wore expressions of barely concealed mistrust. The whispers that had been circulating for weeks had grown louder in their absence, and now those doubts had taken root. Steele stepped off the ship, his boots hitting the ground with a sense of finality. He was greeted by Colonel Samuel Harrington, one of the Coalition's top commanders and a man known for his hardline stance against alien interference. Harrington's eyes flicked from Steele to Zara, and Steele could sense the distrust radiating from him. "General Steele," Harrington said, his voice cool and measured. "Welcome back. I trust your mission was productive." Steele nodded, his expression unreadable. "We intercepted the Zukari special unit before they could reach the installation. But the main fleet is still on its way. We need to prepare, and we need to do it fast." Harrington's gaze shifted to Zara, and Steele could see the suspicion in his eyes. "And what exactly is the Zellorians' role in this preparation, General? How do we know they're not leading us into a trap?" Steele's patience was wearing thin. "The Zellorians have been nothing but allies since they arrived. Without them, we wouldn't have even known the Zukari were coming. We need to trust them if we're going to survive this." Harrington crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "Trust? General, with all due respect, trust is in short supply right now. We've been receiving reports from across the Coalition, rumors of Zellorian ships near our most sensitive installations, unexplained equipment failures, and now this sudden appearance of a Zukari fleet. It's all too convenient. Steele's temper flared. Convenient? You think the Zkari are here by some Zalorian design? They're here to destroy us, Colonel. And if you don't put your paranoia aside, you'll be playing right into their hands. Before Harrington could respond, a loud alarm blared through the base, sending a shiver down Steele's spine. It was the signal they had all been dreading. The Zkari fleet had entered the solar system. Get to the command center, Steele barked, turning on his heel. We don't have time for this. The command center was a hive of activity. Screens displayed the positions of the Zkari ships, which were advancing in a tight, disciplined formation. The Earth Coalition's fleet, bolstered by Zalorian warships, was moving to intercept, but the size disparity was staggering. Steele took his place at the head of the room, flanked by Zyra and Harrington. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and Steele knew that every decision he made from this point on would determine the fate of humanity. Open a channel to the fleet, Steele ordered. All units, prepare to engage. We need to hold the line at all costs. As the orders were relayed, Steele turned to Zyra. We need to use the Zalorian technology to its fullest potential. What are our best options? Zyra's expression was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. Our ships are equipped with advanced shielding and energy weapons that can pierce through the Zkari's defenses. But we'll need to focus our efforts on their flagship. If we can take it down, the rest of their fleet may lose cohesion. Steele nodded. Agreed. We'll make the flagship our primary target. But we need to be careful. If they realize we're targeting it, they'll throw everything they have at us. As the first shots were fired, the room was plunged into a frenzy of activity. The Coalition ships moved to engage the Zkari, and the battle began in earnest. The screens in the command center lit up with the glow of energy weapons and explosions. The void of space transformed into a chaotic battlefield. Despite the odds, the Coalition forces held their ground. The Zalorian ships, true to Zyra's word, were formidable in combat, their weapons cutting through the Zkari ranks with deadly precision. But the Zkari were relentless, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Focus all fire on the Zkari flagship, Steele ordered, his voice steady. We need to take it down now. The command center watched in tense silence as the Coalition's fleet concentrated its firepower on the Zkari flagship. The massive vessel absorbed the barrage with its shields, but even they began to falter under the sustained assault. We're getting through, Zyra exclaimed, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Their shields are weakening. But as hope began to swell in the room, a sudden, devastating turn of events unfolded. The Zkari, sensing the imminent danger to their flagship, launched a desperate counterattack. A wave of Zkari ships broke through the Coalition's lines, heading straight for Earth. They're bypassing our defenses, an officer shouted. They're heading for the surface. Steele's heart sank. The Zkari had changed their tactics, and now they were going for the kill. If even a single Zkari ship made it to Earth's surface, the damage would be catastrophic. Redirect all available units to intercept, Steele ordered, but he knew it was too late. The Zkari were too close. Suddenly, Zyra's hand shot out to grab Steele's arm. Marcus, there's one last thing we can do. Steele turned to her, desperation in his eyes. What is it? Zyra took a deep breath. The Zalorians have a weapon, one we've never used in combat. It's a last resort, designed to neutralize an entire fleet. But it's dangerous. If we use it, it could destroy the Zkari. And us. Steele stared at her, the weight of the decision crashing down on him. The fate of Earth, the lives of billions, rested on his shoulders. If they did nothing, the Zkari would destroy Earth. But if they used the Zalorian weapon, they could win the battle at the cost of their own lives. Do it, Steele said, his voice filled with resolve. We have no other choice. Zyra nodded, her expression somber. She turned to the control console and began inputting commands. The room fell silent as everyone watched, holding their breath as the final countdown began. Weapon systems online, Zyra reported, her voice calm. Firing in 3, 2, 1. A brilliant burst of light erupted from the Zalorian fleet, a shockwave of energy that rippled through space, enveloping the Zkari's ships. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The screens in the command center went dark, the data feeds overwhelmed by the sheer power of the weapon. When the light finally faded, Steele's heart pounded in his chest. He stared at the screens, waiting for them to come back online, praying that the weapon had worked. Slowly, the screens flickered to life, revealing the aftermath of the battle. The Zkari fleet was gone, completely obliterated. The Coalition's ships, battered but intact, remained in formation, their crews cheering as they realized they had won. But the cost of victory was steep. Steele turned to Zyra, who had collapsed into a chair, her energy spent. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. Zyra managed a weak smile. "Yes, we did. But it's not over yet. There will be consequences. The Zkari were not the only enemy we faced." Steele frowned, not fully understanding her words, but there was no time to dwell on it. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. They had survived, but now they had to rebuild, to heal the wounds that had been inflicted on Earth and its people. As the celebrations erupted across the base, Steele stood in the command center, staring at the screens, lost in thought. The alliance between humans and Zalorians had been tested in the fires of war, and they had emerged victorious. But Steele knew that victory was only the beginning. The real challenge would be to forge a lasting peace, to ensure that the sacrifices they had made were not in vain. And that would require more than just strength, it would require trust, understanding, and the willingness to look beyond the past and embrace the future. The price of victory. The aftermath of the battle left the Earth Coalition in a state of uneasy celebration. They had emerged victorious against the Zkari, but the cost of that victory was painfully evident. The soldiers and officers who had fought so bravely were left to grapple with the reality of what had been done to secure their survival. General Marcus Steele stood at the edge of the Coalition's main military base, gazing out at the horizon. The sky was clear, deceptively peaceful after the chaos that had unfolded only hours before. The weapon Zyra had unleashed had saved them, but its power had left a mark on everyone who had witnessed it. Beside him, Zyra was silent, her eyes reflecting the same turmoil that Steele felt. She had been the one to activate the weapon, to make the decision that had led to the destruction of the Zkari fleet. And while they had succeeded in protecting Earth, Steele knew that the consequences of that choice were far from over. "How long do you think we have before the next threat comes?" Steele asked, his voice low. Zyra sighed, her shoulders slumping. "It's hard to say. The Zkari were one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, but there are others out there. And now, after what we've done, they'll know we're willing to go to any lengths to protect ourselves." Steele nodded, the weight of command pressing down on him. "We've shown them that humanity and the Zalorians are a force to be reckoned with. But at what cost? We've lost so much already." Zyra's gaze shifted to the horizon, her expression thoughtful. "The cost was high, Marcus, but we're still here. We have a chance to rebuild, to create something better than what we had before. But it won't be easy." As they stood there, Steele noticed a small group of soldiers approaching, led by Colonel Harrington. The man's usual stern expression was softened by something Steele hadn't seen in him before: respect. "General Steele, Zyra," Harrington said, nodding to each of them in turn. "I wanted to offer my thanks. I had my doubts about the Zalorians, but today you proved that our alliance is worth fighting for." Steele regarded Harrington carefully, sensing there was more to his words. "Thank you, Colonel." But I think we both know that this victory has left us with a lot to reckon with. Harrington nodded, his eyes serious. Indeed. The weapon you used. It's going to raise questions, not just among our own people, but across the galaxy. There will be those who see it as a threat, something to be feared or even destroyed. Zyra spoke up, her tone measured. We never intended for the weapon to be used like this. It was a last resort, a way to protect both our species. But I understand the concerns it raises. That's why I'm proposing that we dismantle it. Steele looked at her, surprised. Dismantle it? But it's the only thing that saved us. Zyra shook her head. The weapon is too dangerous, Marcus. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could be used to destroy entire worlds. We can't allow that to happen. If we're going to build a future together, it has to be one where we don't rely on weapons of mass destruction. Harrington seemed to consider this, then nodded slowly. I agree. We need to find a way to protect ourselves that doesn't involve such extreme measures. It's a risk, but it's the right thing to do. Steele felt a pang of uncertainty. The weapon had been their lifeline in the battle, and without it, they would have been crushed by the Zkari. But he also knew that Zyra was right. The power they had wielded was too great, too dangerous to keep in their arsenal. All right, Steele said finally. We'll dismantle the weapon. But we need to make sure we have something to take its place, something that can defend us without endangering the entire galaxy. Zyra nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. We'll work together, Marcus. The Zalorians have technology that could help, but we'll need time to develop it. In the meantime, we need to focus on building trust between our people and with the other species in the galaxy. Steele glanced at Harrington, who gave a brief nod of agreement. Trust, Steele echoed. It's a hard thing to come by these days, but it's the only way we'll survive. As they turned to head back to the command center, Steele couldn't help but think about the future. The alliance between humans and Zalorians had survived its first real test, but the road ahead was still uncertain. They had won the battle, but the war for peace and stability was just beginning. In the days that followed, the weapon was dismantled, its components carefully taken apart and stored in secure locations. News of the victory spread across Earth, and while there was celebration, there was also a sense of unease. People knew that the galaxy was a dangerous place, and that the Zkari were only the beginning. Steele spent long hours in meetings with coalition leaders, discussing strategies for defense and diplomacy. The destruction of the Zkari fleet had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and Steele knew that they would need to be prepared for the fallout. But as the days turned into weeks, a new sense of purpose began to take hold. The Zalorians shared more of their technology with humanity, working side by side with Earth scientists and engineers to develop new ways to protect their planet. The relationship between the two species deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared goals. And as they worked, Steele began to see the glimmers of a brighter future, a future where humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with, but a leader in a new era of galactic peace. One evening, as the sun set over the Coalition's headquarters, Steele found himself standing alone, looking out over the city. The battles he had fought, the losses he had endured, all seemed to fade away as he considered what lay ahead. He had been given a second chance, a chance to help shape the future, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. And as he stood there, he made a silent vow to himself, to do whatever it took to ensure that the sacrifices made in the fight against the Zkari were not in vain. Because in the end, Steele realized, the true victory was not in the destruction of their enemies, but in the creation of something better. A future where trust, cooperation, and understanding were the strongest weapons of all. And with that thought in mind, Steele turned away from the sunset and walked back into the command center, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The end.